Boxing Truth here. Was supposed to release this story yesterday. It's been it's already been talked about, I've seen, but here's my version. Of course, I had to talk about Canelo Alvarez. It's Canelo Khan fight week, and you could see it, you could feel it, and a lot has been said throughout fight week. A lot of interesting quotes, a lot of interesting comments, a lot of interesting interviews that's involved Team Canelo Alvarez himself, and also Oscar De La Hoya. And Canelo Alvarez is feeling like a king right now. He's feeling like a G, the man of the hour, star of the show. He's been destined to become one of the faces of boxing, and it's coming true. The big Las Vegas pay-per-view bills, the major events he's been in, the money generated from his events, pound-for-pound lists, lineal middleweight title, despite not beating a legitimate middleweight. And Canelo is flexing his muscles, flexing his power, enforcing his A-side status in big time in Gennady Golovkin, making crazy statements that Golovkin ain't on his level, that he needs to earn his stripes, he needs to beat someone of note, that his caliber of opposition, Golovkin's caliber of opposition, is nowhere near the level of Canelo's. That he hasn't earned his shot at the middleweight title, despite Gennady Golovkin being the interim champion for the WBC, despite that he's next in line for that shot, whoever wins on May 7th between Canelo and Khan. Now, this is just a bunch of bullshit coming out of Canelo's mouth, trying to do his best to defend the constant questions that the media keeps asking him about what's going to happen after May 7th if he beats Khan. Is he going to fight Golovkin? And Team Canelo and Golden Boy are doing whatever they can to make demands of Golovkin. Also trying to big time him, throwing shade, talking shit, criticizing Golovkin's opposition. And De La Hoya, he's behaving like he has a cash cow of the sport. He's making some crazy statements, talking about that if a Canelo Mayweather rematch was to happen, that Canelo's entitled to 70% of the split. I mean, even that made me raise my eyebrow. I mean, I don't see that happening. I mean, even if that fight was to happen, that ain't happening. 70-30? Nah. But it's just, unbelievable the statements Team Canelo and Golden Boy are making. Pretty much showing no intentions of fighting Triple G next, despite him being the mandatory challenger for Canelo's belt. And this interview was interesting, featuring Canelo. He was gunning on Gennady's opposition. And when he made the statement that Golovkin needs to earn his shot at Canelo Alvarez, at himself, the media asked him, who does Gennady have to fight? And Bernard Hopkins, he chimed in. He didn't want Canelo to answer that question and be a matchmaker for Golovkin. So he chimed in and he made a ridiculous statement, a ridiculous request, demand that Golovkin needs to move up 2 divisions to fight the baddest light heavyweight on the planet in Sergey Kovalev. Beat him in order to get a shot at a welterweight cherry picker and a guy who was made up his own weight division at Canelo weight. Now, Hopkins was trying to compare his career to Golovkin and try to remind everybody that y'all must have forgot that he moved up 2 divisions to take on the number one light heavyweight in the division at that time in Antonio Tarver. Now, it's true, Hopkins did do that, and it was one of his greatest wins of his career. It enhanced his legacy. He upsetted the odds. He was a huge underdog in the fight, and he schooled and dominated Antonio Tarver back in 2006, moving up a 2 full weight classes. But what Hopkins has to fail to mention in his argument about Golovkin needing to move up 2 divisions, he didn't talk about what he did prior to his move up to the light heavyweight division and how he spent the majority of his career in the middleweight division. Made a lot of defenses, made a lot of fought mandatories, fought guys, the middleweight division wasn't strong then, so he fought a lot of, guys with lacking name recognition. But he was winning fights, defending his title, and he finally got the big money fights that he craved for, that he needed to put his name, put himself on the map, raise his profile, get his name out there, and to help him become one of the stars of boxing. He needed those fights with the 2 superstars that he fought, undersized guys that were coming up in weight. He needed that Felix Trinidad fight. He needed the Oscar De La Hoya fight to enhance his career. And he waited for those fights, waited for a long time. He was 36 years old until he got that fight with Felix Trinidad. Came in as the underdog, and he knocked Trinidad out. It was one of his greatest wins. But it was a win that, changed his career. It put him on the map. He needed those fights. I mean, he still would have been a guy who was respected, dangerous, but a no-name guy, a guy that just wasn't only well known among hardcore fans, but outside of boxing, nobody really knew. I mean, he had those fights. He had those big money pay-per-view fights that put him, that raised his profile, put him on another stratosphere. So how about, Golovkin get his shot, get his fight against a superstar who's pretty much the same size as Golovkin. Comes in a little heavier in weight at times. I mean, the guy started his career at welterweight, but majority of his career, Canelo's fought majority at 154, and now he's fighting at 155. But, comes into the ring over 170 pounds on the regular. So he's a middleweight. So how about Golovkin get his shot at a superstar level fighter? How about he get his shot at one of the named fighters in the middleweight division before he moves up 2 divisions? I mean, it's just a ridiculous demand from Hopkins. He's just, I don't know where that came from, that Golovkin needs to fight Kovalev. I mean, first off, Kovalev is a different animal, and in my opinion, Antonio Tarver ain't no Sergey Kovalev. Now, Hopkins, when he made that move to the light heavyweight division back in 2006, he had to make that move at the time because he was coming off 2 L's to Jermaine Taylor in 2005, losing his middleweight straps, losing his titles. So he needed to do something dramatic. He needed to take a big risk, considering the 2 fights with Taylor were shitty, boring fights where Hopkins was not very active in those fights, not throwing a lot of punches. So he needed to do something risky. He needed to get the attention from boxing fans, and he needed to make it interesting for the networks to be interested in airing his next fight. So he did something out of character, something he wouldn't have done when he was at middleweight, at the middleweight division. I mean, he had chances to move up after after he fought Trinidad, because Roy Jones at that time was the man in the light heavyweight division. Now, that fight was constantly being discussed when both guys were at the top of the pound-for-pound list around 2001, 2002, 2003. But Hopkins never made that jump because he wasn't willing to take that risk. He already took an L to Roy Jones at his best weight, at middleweight. So to move up 2 divisions to fight a Roy Jones who was considered invincible at the time, was arguably pound for pound number one, especially in 2002. He was definitely number one pound for pound. So Hopkins never took that risk. He didn't think he could beat Roy Jones, who was still very explosive, still at the top. He waited until Roy Jones was way past his prime. But following Hopkins' losses to Jermaine Taylor, the 2 L's, he finally took that risk because he needed to. He had no choice. There was nothing else he could do in the middleweight division. The networks weren't interested in a third fight with Jermaine Taylor. So he did the unthinkable. He moved up 2 divisions, fought Tarver, upsetted the odds, schooled Tarver, dominated him, and became the lineal light heavyweight champion. But, Tarver is no Sergey Kovalev. Nowhere near as dangerous, nowhere near as ferocious. Not a killer compared towards Kovalev. I mean, Tarver's in his prime was a very good fighter, a lot of power in his straight left hand, but he was a beatable guy. He took a few L's prior to that fight with Hopkins. He had lost to Eric Harding. He had lost a close fight to Roy Jones in their first fight. Then he knocked out Roy Jones in a rematch and then took another L in between that to Glenn Johnson. Then he righted that wrong in the rematch, then fought Hopkins and lost. So Tarver was a beatable guy. Good fighter, but beatable guy. Nowhere near as invincible as Kovalev. I mean, it's hard to find out. It's hard to envision a fighter beating Sergey Kovalev right now. That wasn't Antonio Tarver's identity. He was a beatable guy, but a lot of people weren't expecting him to lose to Hopkins that night in 2006, but it happened. So this is where Hopkins' argument is lacking strength. He needs to consider that Golovkin hasn't had his big fight. He hasn't had a superstar fight him to help him reach another stratosphere, to help him cross over into that destination where he wants to be at as one of the big superstars of the sport. He's already a big star, but he's not at that pay-per-view level of Canelo. That's where he wants to be. And he needs a big name fight to further make his star shine brighter. So it's just crazy that, Bernard Hopkins, other fighters in the sport, other people in the industry, a lot of Triple G's haters, just even though they say he's a hype job, he fights nothing but bombs. He only knocks out cannon fodder, no hopers. It's crazy that they still hold Golovkin to a very high standard, even though they think he's a bum, that he ain't shit, that he don't fight nobody, that he's overrated, and that that he's not a great fighter, that he will be exposed once he fights someone most fans that they know. Once he fights someone that they know. Most fans are criticizing him, or his haters, because they don't know his opponents. Even though, certain guys don't want to fight him. But he has to move up 2 divisions to prove his worth. This is crazy. So, Canelo Alvarez is feeling like a king, talking shit, throwing shade at Golovkin's opposition. The whole Golden Boy team, all their statements, making crazy demands for potential future bouts. Just wanted to put my 2 cents on the situation. Golovkin, Kovalev, a fight I would like to see down the line, of course. One of my dream fights in the sport. But that fight's not in the cards. Kovalev has his own path. He's on his path to an Andre Ward pay-per-view fight. Golovkin has his own path, and that's becoming the undisputed middleweight champion. But if Golovkin can get that big name fight, a big money fight that can put him on another level, then it makes sense for him to move up, as their team has stated. But they still have a mission to accomplish, and let the man accomplish his mission. Like shit, let him see if one of these name guys at 160 will fight him. I mean, and then he can move up. And Canelo's smoking that good shit, man. He Golovkin hasn't earned his shot. He hasn't earned his stripes. He needs to do more for a shot at him. What the hell did Amir Khan do to earn his shot? Struggle with Algieri? Go life and death with him? What did Kirkland go do to earn his shot at Canelo? Not fight for a year and a half, going into his fight with Canelo only to get iced in front of a big crowd in Houston? Whatever, bro. Keep ducking, bro. We all know you ducking. You don't want to fight the man. Too bad I'm not a Khan fanboy. We'll be rooting for Khan to knock Canelo out, but I don't see Khan winning the fight. Just defense is not good enough. His footwork is not good enough. He throws punches with speed but no power. He has speed but no power in his combinations. He can be easily countered. Chinny against lighter punchers. It's not going to happen. Canelo will ice Khan, most likely. Chin him, flatten him. And then finally, we'll get some answers after May 7th. This is Boxing Truth. Ma.